Okay, so this is the second time that I'm making this video. I recorded the whole thing and kind of talked about how I didn't really like Hollow Knight all that much, but how there were like a few things in it that I really liked. There were a couple things in it that I thought were pretty cool, and then there were some things in it that kind of almost ruined the game for me. But I didn't end up liking my energy in that video all that much, and so I put it off for a few days. I was planning on re-recording it. I played the game a bit more, and I think I've kind of come around to it in some ways. I'm doing like the same script, but with a new wholesome attitude about the game. We shall see. That being said, I'm still not kind of sure if I like Hollow Knight yet. To preface this, I'm not really a big 2D platformer fan in general. The only reason I'm really making one right now is because I was asked to make one for Secret Santa. I'm also just not that far into Hollow Knight yet. This is really about my first impressions of the game. I'm like 5-ish hours in. I've beaten the False Knight and Hornet. The Hornet. Whoever the person in the dress is. And I'm in the process of pushing my way into the Fungal Wastes. So I'm going to be talking about my first impressions of the game from my first 5 hours of gameplay, talking about the things that I liked in the game, the things that I didn't, and my journey into Hollow Nest. Beyond everything else, I think that the world of Hollow Knight is something that stands out as really, really special, and is probably why such a large following has grown up around the game. The concept of this fallen kingdom of bugs that you get to delve into and explore. This mysterious disease that is spreading from creature to creature through the stale air, corrupting them and turning them mad. Opening ancient stagways and finding whatever the hell opens this door. I don't know why this is like getting to me so much, but I keep coming back to this little fucking door, wondering how the hell I'm supposed to open it, or these? Whatever these things are, I don't know what they are. I don't even know if I can interact with them, but I keep finding them all over the place and I want to. And it might sound like I'm complaining about it at this point, but this is the kind of thing that I love in games. This mystery and not knowing how or where you have to go to solve it, just having the open world in front of you and the opportunity to explore. I love the atmosphere of the game. Everything in it has such a unique flavor, from the designs of its characters to its music and its environments. Every single region that you travel to feels so unique in its enemies and its flora and its music and its vibes. I guess one of those takes will work. I love all of the characters that you meet and how unique they feel in their designs and their motivations. Every line that they say feels intentional in what they reveal about the world. Just enough to keep you interested and give you a question, but never enough to answer it or explain themselves. And I love the small humanizing animations that we see from all of the characters in the game. The way that the knight glances down at his map when he's trying to figure out where to go, or gazes up at the world just taking in its beauty. I love the way that Iselda leans over the counter when she gets bored, or this like old guy hunches because he's old. I guess. That feels mean. These little moments of them interacting with the world in the same way that we are so intimately familiar connects you to them and humanizes them. I love the attention given to the character design in the game. Like look at these two bugs. Just by looking at them, you could guess which one is going to lunge at you and which one is going to try and bite you. And yeah, whatever, it's kind of obvious in hindsight. We just know that this is the kind of thing that a good game has to do well. But someone still had to do it. We can look at a detail like this and see the human being behind the art. And I think that's kind of special. Okay, see, like, I like the game. But there are a few things that stood out in my initial 5 hours that, I didn't really like all that much. And I feel like I should talk about those too, so we're all gonna be okay with that. The game's design seems to be a little, like, hostile to exploration. Sometimes. Which ruffled me because I love exploring in a game like this, and especially with how gorgeous the art is and distinct these biomes are, I want to find every corner of them. Every time you die, you drop all of your money, and you get this big debuff to the maximum number of, like... Are these souls? Is it milk? Whatever it is, the top of it gets lopped off, and you can't carry around nearly as much of it anymore until you backtrack all the way to wherever you died and collect it again. And I like the idea of it. I think it's super cool to get to, like, journey back to where you died and fight your own ghost to reclaim your lost power. And I'm sure that it's, like, really important to the lore and makes sense when you really dive into it. But it kind of just, like, felt disheartening sometimes. Especially when you end up in a scenario where you have to do it again and again. It really reminded me of my least favorite part of my second favorite game of all time, Valheim. In Valheim, it's very, very easy to let yourself fall into a death loop, where you've journeyed far from home, and then you die somewhere. And you drop all your good gear there, you respawn back at base, you have to re-equip with, like, your second best gear, and then journey back there to try and get your best stuff. And then you're probably gonna die again, because you're not in your best gear, and then you drop your second best, and you have to try and do the journey again with worse stuff, again and again and again, until you finally get lucky, or you quit. A lot of people end up quitting during that stage of the game, and that's so sad, because I think that the game has so much to offer. I was starting to get a very similar feeling to this in Hollow Knight, when I would go on this big, long journey into a new biome, trying to get to the next bench where I could save my progress. But before I got there, I died. And now you have this debuff, and now you have to do the same journey back to wherever you just died, but harder. I felt this the most on my initial push into Green Path. There's a really long distance between those benches, you guys, and I died a lot trying to get between them. But it was kind of also my fault, because, like, I had just done the thing with the witch and gotten the spell, and because the spell is also bound to B, the same as holding B to heal, I kind of in my head assumed that it was one or the other. That you could play as, like, a glass cannon with a ranged attack, but not be able to heal, or you could not have a ranged attack, but you would have the ability to heal. I don't know why that made sense in my head, but that was the assumption that I made, and I didn't check it. So between when I got the so between when I got the spell and when I figured this out, I did not heal. And that caused me to do a lot more backtracking than I probably should have in the game. But I think that the point still kind of stands. The amount of backtracking that you have to do both when you die and both when you just want to travel to an area you have been before, it was just a lot more than I found enjoyable. This is kind of a side note to backtracking, but I really didn't like that you had to go and sit at a bench to update your map. I love knowing where I am, and especially in a game with as much exploration as Hollow Knight. I love that when you buy a map, it's not fully filled out. I love that you have to go and find these areas and fill them in yourself, but I wish that you could kind of just, like, pop a squat wherever and scribble those details in, instead of having to backtrack all the way to a bench in order to do that. There were so many times on long trips of exploration when I was trying to fill out my map where I didn't know if I could keep pushing through and then find my way out into an area I'd been before, or if it would dead end. And I didn't know that because I couldn't fill out my map. And so my options became either push through and hope that I don't end up having to do even more backtracking, or backtrack early and go all the way back to a bench and write down my progress. Especially in a game with as much exploration and as little direction as Hollow Knight gives you, I just really would have enjoyed it if there were more opportunities to update your map. They didn't even have to be, it doesn't have to be a checkpoint or a heal, just a chance to fill in my map. I was going to talk about how much I didn't like using a controller, but I think that's just a skill issue. I would have liked it if Hollow Knight had better, like, keyboard controls, but, all in all, I do think that's just a skill issue on my part. I'm learning, I'm getting there, it's getting better. I think the one moment in Hollow Knight that really would break my immersion is whenever certain of these characters would talk. Why do they sound like that? They always kind of sounded like they were joking? Or maybe it was just that they were too much like some dude just doing a voice. But they always sounded out of place in the world. I would make this harrowing journey deep underground, fighting horrible monsters and seeing some of the most beautiful landscapes known to bug. That sounds stupid. I would make these harrowing journeys deep underground, fighting off the lost remnants of an ancient civilization that had gone mad with a disease that I didn't understand. Seeing new horrors and great beauties, only to arrive back at the surface and hear this.
Nah, mia cara.
And I don't know, like, eerie caverns to Minecraft villager noise was just never a transition that I was able to make with any kind of grace. Okay, we did it. I'm so proud of you. That's all the things I didn't like about Hollow Knight. And now I get to talk about the thing that I really, really loved. The knight himself. Again, watch this video by Juniper Dev to see someone say it much better than I could. She refers to them as little white guys, but I am going to expand that a little bit to Projection Protagonists. These are characters who don't tell you exactly how they're feeling in a given moment, and so instead force you to contend with your own emotions about the situation. My favorite examples of this character archetype is Spear and Fang from the TV show Primal. Primal follows a caveman named Spear and a dinosaur named Fang as they fight to survive in an incredibly hostile world. Neither of our two main characters can speak in any kind of language that we would understand, because they're a caveman and a dinosaur. And so this means that the entire dialogue of our show is composed entirely of grunts and growls. An initial impression to that might be that a show like this can't have as much emotional depth as a show with sort of a written text. But I had the complete opposite experience with it. Seeing these characters go through these massive roller coasters of emotions, dealing with grief and trauma and death and sacrifice, all without having the words to tell us how they're feeling, it allows you to project far more complex emotional states onto them than I think you could if they were using words. Words all have definitions and cultural connotations that change depending on where you're from and what year you watch it. But the raw feelings don't. Grief is grief. Loss is loss. You can use words to describe and explain these feelings, but there's always something there that the words can't convey. Something that you can only feel. Something primal. Characters that don't use words force you to substitute yourself for them. to connect to them as people, beyond the borders of species and language. You don't get access to the shields you can throw up against words. There is no intellectualizing it. You can't quibble with their definitions or their choice of words. It asks you to look them in the eye and tap into a moment where you have felt what they are feeling. To connect to them. To be them. This archetype of character transfers so well to video games. On top of watching these characters go through these scenarios of grief and danger and loss, you're controlling them during it. It blurs the lines between whether you are watching a character do something and projecting onto them, or whether it's happening to you. I would never watch an episode of Primal and say that I hunted a mammoth, or that I witnessed magic. But in a game with a projection protagonist, I would. I defeated the False Knight. I defeated the Hornet. I discovered Dartmouth and the Forgotten Crossroads and Green Path. It was me. He is me. And I think that that's why I am going to finish Hollow Knight. Even if I don't love platformers or playing games on controller or backtracking, I love him and this world and his story. And I want to see how my story ends. Thanks. Bye.